Hello, Sageman here, bringing you episode 36. That's a nice round number, or square, rather. I like square numbers, so this is a special-ish episode. Kinda. Not really. Yeah, I'm gonna do an extra little segment at the end, but other than that, this is just a normal episode. And let's get it started. In the fanfiction segment, we're reading book 4 of the Three-Way Crossover Saga. It's only 8 chapters long, so we'll read the whole thing. Like I said, where books begin and end was completely arbitrary in this story, so I didn't enjoy the prelude. I enjoyed book 1, was bored by book 2, enjoyed book 3 pretty well, so I'm guessing I won't enjoy this one. I'm guessing it alternates. So, book 4 is called Fallen. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Temptation, narrated by Rosalie. Rosalie is thinking about how they defeated the Volturi, and there's more love in the world now, and her reaction is la-di-frickin-da. She internally monologues about this for some time before she finds herself in the cocoon, facing Fallen. Fallen offers to turn her into a human if she completes a task, and Rosalie happily accepts, completely ignoring the imagery of everyone she loves drifting by. It's never actually explained what Fallen wants her to do. It's implied here that it's a single murder, but later implied to be a lengthy series of tasks. I don't know. We just know Fallen has given her 18 hours to do it. Chapter 2, Dream, narrated by Max. Max dreams of Fallen as well, who is interested in Max due to her being an unnatural creature, and yet her fate intertwined with that of the world. Upon awakening, Max discovers that all of her flockmates also dreamed of the same creature. Angel is sure Fallen is real and dangerous and interested in them. Chapter 3, Lock and Key, narrated by Bella. Rosalie is 7 hours into her series of tasks, and the rest of her family pin her down to try to figure out what she's up to, since you can't really keep secrets around Edward and Alice. Rosalie fights back. She wants to be human again, but Emmett agrees to hold her until her time passes, at which point Alice is sure, despite not normally being able to see the fates of non-human and non-vampire folks, that Fallen will send signs and then come before them. Chapter 4, Adoption, narrated by Susan. Susan and Dr. Cockroach are at an adoption agency thing, and Bella is their reference, who vouches for them but tells them they have to have a meeting to talk about Fallen. Dr. Cockroach knows of Fallen from a book of universal mythology, creatures that appear in the mythology of every culture, which says Fallen is a being devoted to balance and neutrality, who awakens when the balance is tipped. Chapter 5, About Time, narrated by Fang. It's just some fluffy romantic stuff between Fang and Max. Well done, nothing worth reporting. Moving on. Chapter 6, Gathering, narrated by Jacob. Rosalie's time has passed, and she's calmed down and is now ashamed at what she attempted to do in an attempt to regain her mortality. Whatever it is she tried to do. The Modesto monsters arrive, now with Susan and Dr. Cockroach's new adopted teenage daughter, Oluchi. Jacob's packmate Seth imprints upon Oluchi. There's a queso dip joke, which is weird because the chapter doesn't have a queso dip in its title. Edward addresses the assembly, saying that Alice has seen Fallen will send signs of its arrival. The sign turns out to be a big digital billboard declaring Fallen will arrive in 6 days. Chapter 7, Studies, narrated by Dr. Cockroach. Looks to be the shortest chapter in the whole series, if I had to guess, only 6 paragraphs. Dr. Cockroach is trying to study Fallen in his book, but just isn't sure of what information he can get on this mythical being from stories that are, well, myths. Chapter 8, Showdown, narrated by Alice. 6 days later, the united families find themselves in the cocoon, and Fallen asks for Max, Susan, and Bella to come forward and give their views on their families. They all declare that they're the best family in the world, and they're that way because they try really, really hard, and they will never allow Fallen to hurt them. Fallen brings forth their 3 fathers, Carl Murphy, Jeb Batchelder, and Charlie Swan. Jeb, being Jeb, recognizes Fallen. They all vouch for their daughters being loving, important people, regardless of whether they're natural, normal humans or not, and Fallen zaps them with lightning. Susan, Max, and Bella all intercept the lightning bolts and are disintegrated. Fallen accepts this and sends everyone else back to Earth. Alice's future vision tells her that no one on Earth will see Fallen for another 7,000 years. And just as everyone starts mourning the 3 fallen heroes, they are returned. And that's it. That's the whole story. Well, that was kind of a lame installment overall, but the ending, the showdown such as it was pretty cool and emotional with the fathers and the sacrifice. The series ends in Book 5, the longest installment of the series, entitled Moon, Sun, and Stars. We'll talk about that story in the next 3 episodes. Droon! We begin Season 5 of my fantasy Droon adaptation. It's The Secrets of Droon, Book 29, Pirates of the Purple Dawn. It's a rather memorable one, if I remember correctly, which I should, because it was memorable. Chapter 1, The Vision Thing. The book opens with Eric having a vision of being visited by a mysterious figure who smells of apples, who asks him what's been going on in Droon lately. He recaps the series for the benefit of the figure and the audience, ending with how Spar has turned good and disappeared. Eric wakes up in the middle of his classroom, realizing he's been expositing about Droon out loud to Mrs. Michaels and his entire class. Fortunately, Nelag turns up to collect them, erasing the class's memories of Eric telling them everything about Droon. Crisis averted. They go to Droon, where they immediately face a massive ocean wave. Chapter 2, In the Stone Tree. Galen and Kia contain the wave in a magic bottle. In Galen's Wizard Tower, the 3 Droon heroes explain that Droon has been infected by purple mist, the Purple Dawn, a sign that someone is coming to Droon's present from its past. Flink reports that many magical stones all over Droon are being stolen. The Tower of Zorfendorf Castle, the Ring of Giants, the Walls of Dubesh, even the Horns of Ko. Kia decides to consult Portentia, and brings the entire tower to the Farn Woods. Chapter 3, Stopping by the Woods. They go to Portentia's grove and find that Portentia herself, being a magical stone, has also been stolen. The culprits soon reveal themselves, Ving and the Hawk Bandits of Tarkum, returning from Droon's distant past via the Purple Dawn. Nelag decodes Ving's doublespeak to realize the Hawks are taking all these magical stones to Feshu, where Grendel and the Hog Elves were once enslaved, to grind them up in the magical stone mill. They soar to Feshu on the backs of flying blue pilkas. Chapter 4, Dark Land of Dark Deeds. As they near Feshu, they come upon a troop of Nins who talk about being robbed by the Hawks. They get sidetracked and off on tangents several times during the story, which the narrator treats as a normal trait of Nins, but it's never happened before and never since, so I think Tony pulled it out of the air just to make Nelag useful here. Anyway, these appear to be Hawk Pirates, the ocean-dwelling counterparts to the Hawk Bandits, who are led by Ving's twin sister Ming. Galen is downright terrified at the notion of having to face Ming again. The heroes continue to fly to Feshu, slowly followed by the Nins. Chapter 5, The Crushing Wheel. The magical crushing wheel of Feshu, an iron wheel 100 feet in diameter, is crushing the many magical stones. Galen swears to find a charm to undo this destruction. They split up to make it through the mill, Eric and Neil sticking with Kia. A torch on the wall turns out to be made of sylphs, the snakes of Demeter, who are loyal to Kia and guide her through the maze. They find Portentia, but are captured by Ving and Ming. Chapter 6, Double Your Fun. It's noted that the Hawk Bandits are easily distinguished from the Hawk Pirates, because the pirates are dressed like pirates and occasionally go, "Arr!" That's kind of silly. Bandits and pirates are essentially the same thing. Pirates wouldn't... It's just silly, that's what it is, but I dig it. Ming explains that the Hawks are using the magical stones to build the magic city of Makarto. All they need is the key of Makarto, which they claim Kia knows where to find, and the city will spring into being as a haven for thieves and, well, mostly thieves. Kia is placed in a cage of light for interrogation, while everyone else is imprisoned in a normal dungeon. Eric sends a phantom out to sneak through the dungeon walls. Chapter 7, Helping a Friend. As a phantom, Eric has no wizard powers and can't even manipulate objects, but at least a piece of him is out of the cell. He consults with Galen, who's sneaking around, and goes to find Kia. As she is guarded only by Ichthos, Eric uses his phantom status to slip in and out of the cage of light to trick Ichthos into thinking it doesn't work and fiddling with a lever, allowing him to free Kia. The sylphs confess to having told Ming where to find the key of Makarto, the Doom Gate of Witch Demeter. According to the sylphs, Demeter once told Kia exactly which room it was in, but Kia doesn't remember. Kia sends Flink out to contact Grendel, who naturally has experience here, and Kia and Eric fly over the Serpent Sea to find the key. Chapter 8, Doom at the Dome. They get to Demeter's kingdom only to find it in ruins. They dive into the water, and Eric finds that parts of him are wet, which he thinks means the Phantom is starting to become his real body. Sure enough, he's fading from the prison cell. Kia and Eric enter the Doom Gate, where Kia first inadvertently gave Eric his powers. They find a tiny palace, no larger than a bottle cap, and Kia realizes it's what they're looking for. She grows it back to palace size, and they search the palace until they find a key. Ming lures them out by mimicking the voice of a sylph in distress. She takes the key and departs, but the real sylphs help Eric and Kia pursue. They swim to the surface and are rescued by Grindel and an army of hog elves, riding on the backs of the two Sorewings. Chapter 9, Home, Evil Home. Now, at this point, there's an actually pretty awesome aerial dogfight, the massive Sorewings versus assorted tiny hawk bandits. Galen encourages the kids to let Ming use the key to Makarto, for Potentia has made a prophecy that whoever uses the key will be blasted to bits. Ming hesitates, but knows the way around this and hits Galen with the same device she used to defeat him last time, a beam that turns Galen into Gelna. Gelna is a female version of Galen, described by Max as Galen as if he were his own sister. So if Galen was a woman, he'd be a woman child who does everything she's told? I don't like the implications there, but anyway, yeah, that's Gelna's shtick. She does anything anyone tells her to do. So Ming orders her to turn the key of Makarto. Chapter 10, The Trickster and the Tricked. But just then, Galen shows up. As it turns out, Ming turned Nelag into Gelna, so naturally Nelag Gelna does not do what she's told, and he steals the key from Ming as he turns back into himself. There's another big dogfight, which is directly called a dogfight. Galen uses the ocean wave he bottled at the beginning of the book to defeat the Hawk Bandits, and throws them back into the Purple Dawn to send them back into their own time. Grindel's knowledge of Feshu allows him to reverse the crushing wheel, turning Makarto back into the various magical stones from all over Droon. Eric asks Portentia who visited him in his vision, but she only says it will all be made clear soon. As they ascend the rainbow stairs, they see a new fog enter Droon, the Green Twilight, a sign that someone is coming to Droon from the future. No review. Nothing to say. Cool book, solid, worthy installment, not an exceptional one. 3 characters to cast in this season premiere, starting with the mysterious figure Eric speaks to in his vision, who I'd want to be played by Yuri Lowenthal. I held off on casting this role until it was revealed who it was, but when I finished the series, I found it hadn't been satisfactorily answered, so I tweeted Tony Abbott about it, asking who it was. I asked him, what was it, Salamandra? And then the next morning I woke up and realized, no, wait, it was Uruk. Spoiler alert, it's Uruk. And that morning, Tony tweeted back to me, not answering directly, but giving me a hint that confirmed it was indeed Uruk. So on this rereading, I've realized this actually shouldn't be Lowenthal's first appearance as mysterious figure Uruk, as a mysterious figure who turns out later to be Uruk also appeared back in the book The Moon Dragon, so I'd have Yuri do that too. Then, Ming. When I learned, before I read the book, just from scanning Scholastic.com's Droon Encyclopedia, that Ming had a twin sister, well, I immediately knew who I had to cast. Back when I first started remembering Droon and fantasizing about making an adaptation, I knew I wanted Jonathan Frakes to portray Ving in his magical, honeyed voice. So when I learned that Ving had a twin, I immediately knew I had to cast Frakes' Star Trek and Gargoyles co-star, Marina Sirtis. Then we come upon Gelna. As you may recall, my dream cast for Galen used to be Mark Hamill, so a character described as being like Galen's sister, I knew I had to cast Carrie Fisher. Carrie was the most unexpected death my dream cast list has ever had, so time for a replacement. A Star Kid replacement. I'm gonna go with Lauren Lopez. The author turning into Lauren Lopez doesn't quite have the same punch as Mark Hamill turning into Carrie Fisher, but sometimes it can't be helped. And today in the Disney collection, we're watching The Brave Little Toaster. Now, Disney didn't make this film, it was very much independent, and I wasn't even sure if it was actually true that Disney distributed it, or if people just assumed it was Disney because it was a cartoon. That question was answered when I got the DVD. It says Disney Presents, right up there at the top, so that's good. Why was it on my list if I wasn't sure if it was Disney? Well, it happens to be one of my favorite films of all time. Haven't seen it in a spell, very eager to get back to it. As I mentioned, this is a film I couldn't find on a digital release, and I've noticed there's a significant amount of overlap between films I had to get on DVD and films that won't be available on Disney+. Are all these films missing or deleted or something? Or vaulted? I don't know. The 2 Brave Little Toaster sequels are on digital and will be on Disney+, but I don't want to watch those. I'm sure they're better than most Disney sequels, but I don't think they'll be particularly lore-heavy. So our film is by Hyperion Pictures. Doesn't Disney Hyperion publish the Percy Jackson books? Explains Disney taking credit for the DVD made by a company of theirs. They took advantage when it got popular. Sure. The film opens on a cottage in the woods, occupied by 5 electrical appliances, whom we soon discover are alive. A vacuum cleaner by the name of Kirby, an electric blanket called Blanky, a desk lamp called Lampy, an old radio, and, of course, the toaster. This film's voice cast consisted of groundlings, who went off in vastly different directions after the film. Toaster is played by Deanna Oliver, who went on to be an animation writer, most notably for Animaniacs. Lampy is voiced by Tim Stack, who I think became a journalist, unless I'm mixing him up with another Tim Stack. Blanky is voiced by Timothy E. Day, who never did anything ever again. Kirby by Thurl Ravenscroft, the legendary basso profundo who's appeared in several Disney films prior to this movie, though never in a role this big. And Radio by John Lovitz, who actually became famous after this film, joining the cast of Saturday Night Live alongside supporting player Phil Hartman shortly after the film wrapped. Oliver, Stack, and Ravenscroft came back for the film's 2 sequels and did virtually no voice work in the intervening 10 years. Now, the 5 appliances don't get along with each other very well, but they still commit to keeping the cottage fairly clean to await the return of the master, the child who owned them, who used to come by every summer, but who they haven't seen in about 5 years. They hear a car coming down the mountain road, and Blanky fantasizes about the master finally coming home, but whoever it is, they simply pass by, reducing Blanky to tears. They've been burned a few too many times at this point, it seems. Then they start getting taunted by the only other electrical inhabitant of the cottage, the air conditioner, played by Phil Hartman doing a Jack Nicholson impression, who bluntly tells them the master is never coming back. They retort that he's just jealous the master never interacted with the air conditioner, making the AC so angry that he overclocks himself and explodes. As far as the central premise of the film, that electrical appliances come to life when humans aren't looking, was clearly the inspiration for Toy Story. Several people who later found Pixar worked on the film, and I'm not going to implement that notion into Keys and Kingdoms, but perhaps there'll be ghostly electric creatures that inhabit electrical appliances that can be made into Keys and Kingdoms monsters. I think there's a ghost Pokemon that can change its type based on the electrical appliance it possesses. Rotom, I believe. Something similar in that concept, based specifically on the 5 heroes of this film. Electrical appliances coming to life is a more internally consistent way for a universe to work than toys, but less fun, I suppose. And characterization in this film is a bit odd. For example, Blanky is voiced by a child, despite being implied to be the same age as the rest of them, and Toaster has a very feminine voice, but every gendered reference to him is masculine. Another car comes by. The human within hammers in a for sale sign, signaling to the appliances that air conditioner was right. Their beloved master will not be returning. So Toaster resolves that the 5 of them will leave the cottage, go to the city, and find the master. After a few false starts, they tie a generator to a desk chair, 4 of them sit on top of it while Kirby pulls, and they go out into the world. And here we have the film's first musical number, City of Light. It's quite cheesy and doesn't make a lot of sense, but if there wasn't a musical number here, we wouldn't know this was a musical, because the other 3 numbers in the film are all in the second half, and that wouldn't be a very well-structured musical. Still isn't, really. Isn't a very tight film as far as writing and animation. Understandable, they didn't have that Disney budget. So yes, the second musical number is after the halfway point, and the setting of that musical number is the first post-wilderness scene in the film. A good half of this movie is spent on our 5 heroes just plowing through the wilderness. Like I said, the structure isn't great, but man, it's so atmospheric. Their first stop is a clearing in the middle of a thorny forest, where they continue to clash with each other. As far as I remember, they never really learned to actually get along with each other. At some point, they just stop being mean. The next morning, they come across a pond inhabited by a bunch of frogs and squirrels and stuff, and the scene serves no purpose but surreal imagery and Mickey Mousing. Kind of a how many drugs were the filmmakers on? I answer, probably none, because no drug lasts long enough to write, storyboard, and animate an entire scene to while high, but still, somebody okayed it for some reason. I'll blame our director, Jerry Rees. Name sounds familiar. What else did he do? Not a whole lot. Apparently he's just a general animation and special effects guy with various credits in previous Disney films, such as Tron and The Fox and the Hound, though he was also a storyboard artist on this film, as well as writer-director, so I'll continue to blame him for this scene. And according to IMDb, he was also radio's singing voice. I had a feeling that wasn't Lovitz. Wonder if that's true. Anyway, the scene is best known, apart from the opera-singing fish, for a scene where Toaster comes up across a flower who falls in love with its own reflection on Toaster's surface, then dies of heartbreak when Toaster leaves its field of vision. I would call that absurdist tragedy. Absurdist tragedy. I cannot. It's early in the morning. I can't speak. I'm doing alright so far. Am I? After leaving the pond, they enter a dark and spooky forest and make camp for another night. As the others sleep, Lampy inquires why Toaster is suddenly being nice to Blanky, and Toaster tries to explain it. It just feels better being nice to one another. Lampy recalls the first time his bulb burned out and the master kept him anyway, and starts to understand. So I guess that's the moment of character development when the quintet started treating each other better. Then in one of the film's more iconic scenes, Toaster has a nice dream about the master, which devolves into a nightmare about a terrifying firefighter clown. I ask you, what the fuck is the point of that? Although I will compliment the scene for including imagery that a toaster would reasonably be afraid of, like forks and bathtubs, though I think those are more logical fears for people carrying toasters, but, toaster-themed fears. Anyway, the nightmare turns out to be because of a thunderstorm going on. Blanky gets swept away in it, and since the generator has run out of power, Lampy uses himself as a lightning rod to attract a lightning strike, burning out his bulb and severely wounding him, but recharging the generator. The next morning, they find Blanky up a tree, and Kirby rescues him with a pretty slick move, the kind of thing a D&D player might come up with if he were playing a vacuum. They later come upon a raging waterfall, causing Kirby to suffer a panic attack. Once he returns to his senses, their attempt at crossing the river goes all wrong, and four of them fall in. Kirby, who's been in a worse mood than usual and has not had the character development that the others have, hesitates for only a moment before jumping in after the others and rescuing them one by one. They make it to shore, all pretty relieved at having survived, but Toaster is disheartened that now they seem to be hopelessly lost. As they make their way through a mangrove-filled swamp, they all sink in the mud. And this seems to be the end of their road until the last minute. Against all odds, they're found by a monster truck-driving electrician named Elmo St. Peters, voiced by the film's co-writer Joe Ranft, who would later go on to be known as a founding member of Pixar in both a creative capacity and as a very funny voice actor until his untimely death by traffic accident in 2005, his last credit being as the co-director of Cars. Elmo's shtick is that he sells parts of appliances, claiming to have recently received a shipment of such parts, only to remove it from one of the many discarded appliances he's collected from the garbage, or apparently out in the swamp. His regular customer is also really weird. This guy named Zeke, also voiced by Tim Stack, who has a very odd character design and says very polite and passionate things in a complete monotone. The appliances who live in Elmo's shop, led by a hanging lap voiced by Phil Hartman doing a Peter Lorre impression, are terrified of Elmo, but also macabrely amused by his antics, and they perform the musical number It's a Bee Movie, about how a store that sells appliance parts is basically a horror movie if you happen to be an appliance. After the number, Zeke returns asking for radio tubes, so naturally Elmo goes to dissect radio. Not wanting to lose a member of their party, the cottage appliances pose as a ghost, scaring Elmo and making him pass out. The shop appliances take this as their cue to stage a mass jailbreak, and our five heroes head to the city in the baby carriage that was in the shop for some reason. And so we finally meet the master himself, real name Rob, a recent high school graduate who's packing for college. Irony of ironies, Rob and his girlfriend Chris are on their way back to the cottage to collect his 5 favorite childhood appliances to take to college with him. The relatively modern appliances in his mother's apartment are offended to hear he intends to take a bunch of antiques with him. The appliances make their way to Rob's apartment, Apartment A113, a number that would later become a staple of Pixar films, and others, being named for the room at, I think, CalArts University, where most animators learn their craft. Radio gives a secret knock, apparently recognized by appliances, and they're welcomed in by the modern electronics, plus the old black and white TV that used to live with them in the cottage. The modern appliances cut off the TV before he can tell the quintet that the master is actively looking for them, and sing a song about how cutting-edge they are by 1987 standards, and promptly toss our heroes into a garbage truck, hoping this means they get to go to college with the master. I guess the song is a nice commentary on consumerism or whatever. I guess that continues to be a relevant subject of satire. It's kind of started in the 80s with, computers and stuff, and technology starting to advance real quick and, Reagan removing the restrictions on commercials. That was Reagan, right? Meanwhile, Rob finds that the cottage has been trashed, the hero's first few attempts at making an escape vehicle, and his beloved appliances are missing. He repairs the air conditioner and heads back home. At the junkyard, it's probably the most famous set piece of the movie. An autonomous magnet roams around the junkyard gathering up objects, sets them on a conveyor belt, and they get crushed into teeny tiny cubes. Rob rejects his mother's offer of taking some of the newer appliances to college, and the TV, knowing the garbage truck was heading to Ernie's disposal, tries to catch Rob's attention with increasingly crazy fake commercials for Ernie's. And we get the last and easily best song of the film, Worthless. Cars being gathered up by the magnet sing of all the meaningful deeds they accomplished in their life just before they get crushed by the crusher thingy, and the chorus declares, "Worthless." I adore this song, though I've never been entirely sure what the message or point was, and I don't like how the scene cuts between the extremely awesome song and the significantly less replayable scenes of the TV trying to catch Rob's attention. Worthless. So Rob and Chris find their way to Ernie's disposal just as the magnet starts to develop a grudge against the five heroes for constantly eluding it. So there's an epic chase through the junkyard. It's a very nice set piece. The five appliances try to get noticed by the master while the magnet pursues them. Rob eventually finds Blanky, Radio, Lampy, and Kirby, but the magnet takes them back, trapping Rob in some wreckage on the conveyor belt. So Toaster throws himself into the crusher's gears to shut it down, saving Rob's life, or the bare minimum his hand, at the last possible second. After that tense climax, we get a very quick denouement as Rob finds Toaster, repairs him, and brings the five appliances to college with him. Happy ending. So yeah, that still holds up as a great movie. I remember it being so. Wouldn't call it my favorite anymore. Its flaws are pretty obvious, but it's just so charming and dark. There's really no reason to care that it's a shoddily animated, underwritten product. It definitely gave me that warm and toasty feeling to revisit it, pun intended. Okay, credits. Let's see. Kevin Lima, future director of the film Enchanted, had quite a few jobs. That's about it. Animation department was a sea of Chinese names, so I guess it was outsourced. Most 2D animation is outsourced, usually to South Korea, but occasionally China, as we see here. But usually not in the case of major Disney projects, so I haven't seen such a sea of names at this point yet. As far as concepts, well, this film basically only has one speculative concept, and the one that the whole film runs on, that all electrical appliances are secretly alive. But as a film, it's very character-based and set-piece-based, kind of an episodic, so it'd certainly be a great inspiration for an adventure. And, as promised, an extra segment I wanted to save for this episode because, like I said, square number, I wanted to muse about a joke I made back in the first episode of the podcast where I briefly flashed my celebrity safe list. Put that up on Stillstore, Cambot. There it is. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, a safe list is a list of people you're allowed to sleep with and your significant other can't get mad. I put a lot of thought into this. Natty has no interest in creating one, so I guess that puts her on the moral high ground. The basic premise of a safe list is that you'll never actually meet any of these people, but I do intend to work in media production in some capacity or another, so I might meet some of these people someday, maybe, but I don't think I'd actually try to sleep with them. I just flashed it on screen briefly as a joke, but despite that, I want to analyze the joke and actually talk about the list a little bit. Okay. Number 10, Lily Allen. Haven't actually listened to a Lily Allen song in ages, but as far as I can remember, she's sexy and she sings sexily. Quite a few people on this list I haven't actually thought about in some years, but I needed 10, so I mined a list from like a really long time ago. Number 9, Meredith Stepien. That's just a joke about how I consider Team Star Kid to be beloved celebrities. I do fantasize about Meredith Stepien, but I fantasize about her seeing me as a colleague and working with me. Besides which, I do believe she's engaged to Brian Holden. I always thought that was just a rumor, that those two were dating, until they personally tweeted about their engagement. Shows what I know. Number 8, Benedict Cumberbatch. Once again, just a joke. I'd like to say that if there was any man I'd be with, but after careful consideration, no, that's not true. There is no man I'd be with. I am a straight, cis, white male. That's a shame. That's as boring as it's possible to be. How's anyone ever supposed to sympathize with me? Well, I am neuroatypical. Asperger's. I guess that's somewhat interesting. Number 7, Emma Watson. Nothing to say. She's pretty. She's a brilliant activist. I'm not as fascinated by her as I was as a child, but, whatever. Number 6, Olivia Wilde. Very hot, very intense, a genuine master of the craft of acting, on top of everything else. Very Number 5, Amy Adams. She's cute and super fun. My favorite redhead, basically. Number 4, Tara Strong. Another joke entry, being a voice actress, but she is quite a hot voice actress, and I do hope to work with her someday. Sadly, there is a Mr. Strong. Number 3, Liv Tyler. Probably the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, although, now that I think about it, I haven't actually seen her in several years. She doesn't seem to have done anything high profile in some time. Now, my top 2 are the only two people on the list I would actually like to sleep with. And both for similar reasons. Both are very confident and body positive women who demonstrate such with very unique and revealing outfits, so I'm very sexually and emotionally attracted to them. Therefore, my real celebrity safe list is just two people. And both are recently single, so I'd better become famous enough to get on their radar as soon as I can. Number 2 was Miley Cyrus, fairly self-explanatory, very sex-positive, very socially aware, very interesting person. The only thing I like better than skimpy outfits and colorful makeup are outfits and makeup that are off-the-rails crazy, and she excels at those. And my number 1 celebrity crush, Ariel Winter. The Modern Family star first caught my attention with her voice acting, which she did as a kid, and obviously I didn't fail to notice her boobtastic red carpet looks, but then when she got breast reduction, and sometime after that, something very interesting happened. She went from boobtastic to holy moly, showing off her new, more manageable figure in outfits the likes of which I'd never seen. The fact that this girl was suddenly feeling that good about herself, well, I felt good for her, and I've been creepily following her on social media. Not precisely since the reduction, since she was 16 or 17 at the time. I didn't really give her a thought other than, that's nice, good for her, admiration. But sometime after that, sometime after she started flaunting it, she eventually stopped dressing quite so skimpily quite so often, which she certainly has the right to do, and she recently lost a lot of weight, which worried me at first, but it seems she's still healthy. She was pleasantly squishy before, so now she's healthily thin, so if it's working for her, it's working for me. So, yeah, enough of me being creepy. All things considered, I'd rather work with Miley Cyrus and Ariel Winter than sleep with them, but, it's on the table, and Natty can't get mad at me if I successfully pull it off. I always dreamed of casting Ariel Winter as Carthena in my Eye of Argon movie because she's quite short, and I'd want everyone in that film to be short so that I, being of merely slightly above average height, can look absolutely massive in the role of Grigner. So in conclusion, I like Ariel Winter's boobs, and I will see you next time, listeners. Stay frosty, or whatever TAPAS fans do. I wouldn't know. There aren't any TAPAS fans yet. Although I do have 11 subscribers, not all of whom I know, so hey, if anyone out there is a TAPAS fan, let me know, will ya? We gotta come up with a communal name for y'all. Tapastics? Is that taken? Anyway, remember, Ariel Winter has the best boobs, and good night.